All right, we're up and running here. Before we get started, I did want to take a moment and introduce the newer audience or some people joining the podcast, whether you're watching on YouTube or listening on Spotify or Apple or any of the podcast services there. This is the PD's Picks podcast. I'm PD, Craig Peterson. I talk all things youth hockey in the state of Michigan. So, AAA hockey tournaments, showcases, top players, top teams in the state, as well as the high school hockey circles, which we're going to spend a lot of time on today and throughout the rest of this month. And I'll have more on that as we go. So, again, if you're not familiar with me, be sure to follow me. I'm on all social medias: Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, obviously here on YouTube as well. Would certainly appreciate it if you like and subscribe. If we talk about anything that piques your interest, be sure to subscribe so that you can stay up to date on everything we're talking about. And also open up the doors to you guys as well. If there's anything you guys want to discuss or want to talk about here on the pod, be sure you can send us an email at contactpdspicks@gmail.com. And be sure to visit the website too, pdspicks.com, where all of my content lives, whether it's blogs, videos. I got top 10 rankings. I got power rankings for the AAA teams right now. And as we work through the month, I'll have preseason rankings for the high school circles as well. So again, pdspicks.com has everything you need there too. So be sure to check out all that and also stay tuned here for the episode as we talk about really just about everything here in the high school or in the youth hockey circles. So with that, let's talk some hockey. I did want to recap some action from the weekend, doing a little scoreboard watching, instant reactions, things like that. I did see 16U VH, who I've been very high on all season so far. If you've listened to any of the episodes, I've talked pretty highly about that VH '07 squad. Beat OJG 1-0. I was a little surprised by that, but the more I look into that '07 OJG team, they're playing teams tough. I want to say they were only like 6-4 or 7-5 on the season, but all those losses are scrappy 1-goal, 2-goal losses. They're hanging in with some tough opponents. From what I saw, what I recall from the Maha Showcase, for instance, I don't know that they have as much talent or as deep as VH or Little Caesars at that age level, but scrappy enough, gritty enough to kind of keep some of those games close that I wouldn't be surprised if they stole some games this year and surprised some people, and ultimately build that body of work to put you in a good spot there for the Maha State playoffs at the end of the year. So VH, by the way, I noticed the Wendy Dufton Memorial Tournament is coming up this weekend, and I saw VH is scheduled to be in attendance, compete against some really high level Canadian teams there. So that's really good competition, unless that's outdated. But again, like I said, I'm just going off of what I saw on the website there. So if in fact VH heading out to Ontario this week, I don't know. I think it's the London Junior Knights host that event, but real quality event. A lot of top teams, obviously from Canada. VH was only one of maybe 2 or 3 U.S. based teams that I saw. I think I saw like who was it? The Colonials, New Jersey Colonials, maybe. There was some other teams representing the U.S. there. But also did want to get to a bit of an MDHL update. I think this coming weekend is the last weekend of league play. And then the showcase is next Wednesday, and I'm definitely eyeing that, planning on being in attendance for that, where it's basically the top 40 18U players from the league, the top 40 16U players from the league, and they play not a scrimmage, they play a game, but it's MDHL versus MDHL, and usually a highly scouted event. You're getting the cream of the crop players from that fall league. So that's always fun to watch, and we'll definitely keep an eye out for that and have some instant reactions. Maybe I'll delay the pod next week so I can talk about the showcase. But nonetheless, we'll talk about it extensively. I'll have coverage there on the website as well. So stay tuned for all of that. To bring you up to speed a little bit on what's going on in the MDHL, Team Green sits in first place. That's the West Michigan team. All the kids based out of the West Michigan for the most part. 7-2-1 record. Jackson Freusland leading the team in scoring, 6 goals and 16 points. I don't know that that's all that surprising that he's the one out in front there. He was a big contributor there on the Team Michigan HP18s last spring, and obviously looks ripe to have a big senior season as well. So Cam Duffney. So this is kind of weird. When I was looking at numbers, I was a little surprised to see this. Cam Duffney leads the league in points. Brooks Rogowski leads the league in goals, and Jackson Walsh leads the league in assists. I don't think you ever see that very often, where your points leader doesn't also lead in goals or assists. So a pretty unique dynamic there in the league. I think that's kind of exciting, to see where you've got a lot of names that are standing out and performing well. And those are just a couple of them. Duffney, obviously the guy there in Brighton, and Brighton, I think, is really ripe for a big season this year, and can't wait to see what they do. Rogowski, Jackson Walsh, obviously 2 big hitters there for CC. We've talked about both of them pretty extensively over the last couple weeks. And then Joe Bettles, underclassman goalie. I think he's a first-year high school kid. I'm not positive on that, but another CC kid. CC again reloading very much. We'll get into my preseason previews and stuff like that further down the line, but obviously CC is at the top until someone proves me otherwise. Joe Bettles, a 1.61 goals against average and a 95% save percentage. Both those numbers are pretty insane for the MDHL. I've mentioned it before. That league is very much like it's like an all-star game in the NHL. Like, it doesn't favor the goalies. If you've got a 3 something goals against average, that's pretty good in the MDHL. And Bettles well below that with a 1.61. Very impressive, and we'll definitely want to see more of him and the rest of the league here as we wrap up league play, their showcase, and then they'll get into the CCM Motown, which I think is 2 weeks away. And then they'll also have playoffs there too. So a lot coming up there for the MDHL. Okay, so kind of debuting a new segment here, a new series. I teased it on Twitter for those of you that are following, and if you're not, be sure to follow, because Twitter tends to be the one where I kind of tip people off on news the most in terms of what we're going to be doing, what content's coming out, that type of stuff. But I teased that I was going to be doing conference previews throughout the month of October here. We are basically 1 month away from the start of the high school hockey season. There's 13 Michigan high school hockey conferences, or at least according to the Hockey Hub. So what I'm going to do is spend some time breaking down each one of those conferences individually. We're going to talk teams, recap last year, returners, players to watch, teams to pay attention to. And I'll give you my picks and predictions for who I think could end up on top at the end of this season. So we're going to talk a lot about each one of those conferences individually. I'm going to start today with 3 conferences, and I'm going to call it the 10-minute talk. I'm going to set my phone timer here, and we'll spend 10 minutes on each one of those conferences. And if I can get through everything I can in under 10 minutes, great. Maybe we'll just kind of keep rolling and go from there. So this will be a little kind of pressure under the gun. See how much of this I can get in 10 minutes, and hopefully don't get cut off or run out of time here. But okay, let me make sure if there's anything else I wanted to hit on before we get started here. To give you a bit of a preview, it's in the title, it's in everything, but today going to be talking the Mid-Michigan Conference, the MAC and the Macomb Area Conference, and the Lakes Valley Conference here to get us started. And next week we'll have 3 more conferences, and the week after that 3 more, and then maybe towards the end we might do maybe spend a little bit more time on some of the other conferences, or maybe even the state and divisions as a whole. Maybe we could do something like that. So okay, I'll get my timer out. We'll get ready here. I'll set the timer here, 10 minutes, and hope that I don't look like an idiot because if I burn through all this information and there's still like 5 minutes left on the clock, that's going to be really awful there. Um, so I was going to preface this with something I'm kind of spacing at the moment, but nonetheless, ton of research here, ton of information. The other thing too, I will mention is I will have blogs on the website that will coincide with each one of these conferences individually. So if you don't get enough information or content or details and stats from me here, you can always go to pdspicks.com where I'll definitely have more information too. So, okay, let's start the timer here. Ready? I got it. There we go. Got my second mono. Okay, here we go. Ready and go. The Mid Michigan Hockey Conference is where I'm going to start today with the first little segment here. I'm setting a timer here. I got to explain this. This is what I was going to say earlier. I try to keep these episodes to about 30 minutes. These ones obviously are going to run long if I'm spending 10 minutes on each conference, but um, I did want to kind of preface that these episodes might be a little bit longer. Hopefully, you're okay with that as a listener. Appreciate any and all feedback as well. So leave a comment. Let me know what you think too. Maybe you want more time. Maybe you want 20-minute talk on each one of these conferences. So, okay, Mid Michigan, 4-team conference. It's the smallest conference in the state. I think there's another conference in the north that's another 4-team conference, but nonetheless, 4 teams. Those 4 teams, though, managed to represent 21 different schools in the state, and that is wild to me. Those are some pretty large co-ops of what did I see? 5 schools, 7 schools, 6 schools, stuff like that. Like they're very large co-ops, but nonetheless, last year's champ was FNV Griffins. That's Freeland Nouvelle Valley. Um, they were 13-11-0 on the season, 6-0 in conference play. They managed to finish 85th overall in the state, according to my hockey rankings. Fenton Linden, who was second in the conference, finished right behind them at 86th overall. So those were the top 2 ranked teams in the conference in the state landscape there for you. Fenton Linden was the only league member last year to advance past the first round of the MHSAA state playoffs. They had a 5-1 win over Milford, which I think that's a pretty big win on their scale there. So 5-3 win over Milford, a good Milford team there in the first round, and then they got eliminated by White Lake Lakeland in the regional semifinal. Those are 2 teams we'll actually have more on a little bit later as we talk the Lakes Valley Conference, but. Fenton Linden graduated its top 4 scorers, so a little bit of concerns there as far as what's coming back or what's in the pipeline here moving forward. I do like Dominic Corso Jr., though. He had 4 goals and 14 points as a secondary player last year. Can he step into that scoring role, that void that was left behind by the likes of Caden Crandall, Carson Gardner, Mitchell Luck, Jace Dumais? Like, they lost a good amount of offense there. So the question to me then is can a Dominic Corso kind of fill that void? FNV returns a kid I like here. He was a freshman last year, Tristan Pohl, 14 goals and was a point per game guy for them as a freshman. So FNV returning that, plus Brady Kingsbury, who enters his senior season on the blue line there. So 2 players there in the conference that you definitely want to keep an eye on. 1 game to circle on the calendar. How much time do I got? Oh, wow, I got plenty of time here. I could probably slow down a little bit. 1 game to circle on the calendar here is obviously the Battle of the Griffins. You got the FNV Griffins. You got Fenton Linden Griffins. The way the conference is set up, I believe you play everybody twice. I think the winner of the first game between FNV and Fenton Linden really may not matter because the loser, ultimately, I could see them running the table and being in a position where they're, what would that be, 4-1? What would that be? Anyways, where you've got that 1 loss, but you're undefeated in the rest. You go into that second matchup. 1 team's undefeated. One's got 1 loss. If the team with 1 loss wins, they ultimately earn a share of the conference championship. and the undefeated team there, or the team that's ahead wins and they win outright type thing. So I do think I think that first game will be a tough game, but I don't think it's necessarily a backbreaker if you lose it because you always have that second game in your pocket. So still got to take care of business, still got to beat the teams you got to beat, but ultimately, like I said, that second matchup is going to be the key there. So uh, all league championships on record. This was kind of wild, at least that I could find on the hub. Basically, came down to these two teams, and I like using that example. Maybe that'll catch on there in the conference, the battle of the Griffins, battle of the mascots. But ultimately, 2024, I don't think that trend changes. I think it still comes down to these two programs. FNV has won 5 of the last 6 league championships, and they return a ton of key players. Some of them I've already mentioned, right? So anytime, especially in the high school circles, when you're returning a lot of experience, like a lot of the teams I'll talk about today are bringing a lot of guys back. And anytime you have that, it's definitely an ace up your sleeve, or a nice thing to have in your back pocket there. So, um, as dominant as FNV has been over the last couple of years, I do like a couple of the returners for Fenton Linden that I mentioned earlier. Uh, on top of that, Porter Labaki in net. He was a kid who, what do I got here? He was a kid who I thought started to separate himself late in the season last season. Ultimately, come playoff time, I think he ended up being the guy in net. Had a what is it? I had his record on here somewhere. He managed to post a winning record on a team that finished 3 games under 500. Like I think that says a lot about the comfort level maybe you should have when he's in net. But I do think he'll be able to steal a couple games in that conference, and may even give, like I said, Fenton Linden a chance to compete with FNV, regardless of who FNV is returning. So I'm not going to rule out Fenton Linden as a contender there, or completely give the nod to FNV. I do think FNV is the odds-on favorite, and probably should come out on top. However, I think the other Griffins in the conference could give them a fight there as well. Let me see if there's anything else here. As far as FNV goes, I'm getting down to it a little bit. I'm doing all right on time. This isn't too bad. FNV, they've produced some real nice players over the years. Kids who have played 3 and 4 years, like kids who have been committed to the process as far as high school hockey goes, which you like to see. And programs like that do have to tend to kind of bring those kids in young and then develop them to be the players they end up being as juniors and seniors. I do think FNV is one of those solid, I'll call it a mid-major type team. It's not a CC or a Heartland or a Rice, but damn, they're growing and developing a lot of those players, like I said, where you're bringing in a young guy like Tristan Pohl and kind of helping develop and shape him into a matured player throughout the process. But also, a lot of that development and growth happens in your non-conference games. Who are you playing out of conference? And I think FNV is doing a real nice job with that. Hold on a second. Sorry about that. I'm trying to burn through all this stuff and I'm running out of gas, so I got to take a water break there. Looking at their non-conference last year, even, and it doesn't even matter to me whether they won or lost the game. When you're taking on top teams like Lumen Christi and Midland and Cranbrook, for God's sakes, RU, Rochester United is a program I've always liked too. Bay City, I mean, those are some big feathers in the cap there. A notch on your belt, whether you win or lose, the fact that you took them on and in a lot of instances played them tough, like that says a lot, and I think sets you up for success. Maybe not in the short term, right? Maybe that loss stings and sucks that week or that weekend, but ultimately that experience is going to help the program grow, the players grow and develop year over year. So, them being 13-10-0 last year, I think you could see FNV really build off of that. And I think, secure that conference championship, which is another feather in the cap as you're kind of growing and developing that program. They're doing a lot of nice things in terms of player development, in terms of program development, and challenging yourselves when you're taking on top teams like that. So there's a lot to like out of that program, uh, and ultimately, I can't say enough good things. So liked a lot of what I saw the more I was digging, and the more I was researching, and whatnot. So so let's see here. I got 38 seconds left. I'll put a bow on that for now. I don't know if I can get to it. I'm gonna run out of time. Uh, if I had any other players I could mention or give a shout out to real quick, but on short notice, that's going to be hard for me to pull up. So I will take a knee and let the clock run out here with 15 seconds there, and we will move on to the MAC, and not the Toledo Akron Bowling Green MAC, but the Chip Valley, Utica Unified, Port Huron type MAC, right? A lot of teams to get into here. Let me pull up my notes just so I'm a little more ready to roll here when we start the clock. Okay, you guys ready? I'm ready. We'll go. Okay, so as far as the Macomb Conference goes, full disclosure here, I'll admit, I think I've dogged this conference, whether it was consciously or subconsciously over the years. Uh, it's just a unique area of the state. It's like a state in a state. And what I mean by that is that little pocket of the state, like, you never, I got a buddy who lives in Shelby Township. I'm never just driving through Shelby Township and I'm like, oh, hey, buddy, let me stop by and say, hey, like, it's not an area of the state you really pass through very much. You're either, if you're from there, you stay in that little bubble. And if you're outside of there, it's not an area you kind of go into unless you have a need to go there, kind of thing. Same thing. You don't really leave unless you have a need to leave, that type of stuff. So it's just a unique area of the state. So like I said, maybe subconsciously I just kind of, write it off or dog it a little bit. And that's 100% on me. So good news is the research and everything I was digging and doing, I can definitely be won over by multiple teams here in this conference. But I digress. That was a long little rant there, but feel free to fire away at me on Twitter, Facebook, whatever you want. Give me your 2 cents and tell me how great Macomb County is. So used to be a 15-team league, divided into 3 divisions. It's now, I think, 10 teams, 2 divisions of 5, basically. And a little unique in that they don't. When I was in the SEC, we did the same thing. They crown division champions. They don't have an overall conference champion. So last year, what am I looking at here? If I can get back to it. Here we go. Chippewa Valley and Eisenhower tied for the Red Division championship. Utica United won the White Division. Kind of a unique year where they ended up having basically 3 MAC champions because of the tie and everything. But some of the largest standalone and co-op programs in the entire state. Chip Valley United, that was a co-op there, a very new co-op with Macomb, Dakota. That put them north of 5,000 in terms of enrollment, and I think that is pretty close to, if not the largest co-op in the state. And so that's a big dog. Utica Unified obviously is north of 3,500. Port Huron, I believe, was tagged as a co-op there on MHSAA.com. And then St. Clair Shores Unified has been a co-op there for a couple of years now too. So standalones, you got Ike, who's north of 2,200, Anchor Bay, 1,840. All 2, 4, 6 of those programs are Division I teams for the state hockey playoffs. So you're looking at 6 of the 10 member programs as D1 schools. So let's see. I already touched on the division champions. I did want to kind of shout out or kind of recognize the division champs from a season ago. but Utica United didn't have any information other than scores on the Hockey Hub. So there's not really a whole lot I can tell you about Utica other than they were the white division champs last year. Let's see here. Ike closed out the season on a 7-4-0 run. I know that might not sound like the most impressive way to close out a season, but I kind of tip my cap to it, especially when I was looking at how the season started versus how the season ended. I think they came a long way, and then looking at some of the players they're returning, it was a young group last year, so I think you can absolutely hang your hat on a 7-4-0 finish, especially when it led to 13-10-2 overall record. And then the other component to it, which to me is probably the most important, was 7 of those losses were by 2 goals or fewer. So they were a young squad and still were never fully out of the fight in a lot of those games. And they graduated 7 seniors. A lot of their top scorers are back, which I think bodes extremely well. I'll get into more of that in a second here. So there's just a lot to like there about Ike and the Eagles, and I'll get into it a little bit more here in a second. Chippewa Valley United, like I said, their first year as a co-op went 27-0, which was by far the best record in the conference. They did graduate 63.9% of their offense from a season ago, so there's a huge void there. I got to see kind of how they replace that or replenish that here in the offseason. I do know they got Cam Staskowski coming in, or my understanding is that he's knocking on the door anyways. I got a good look at him at the MHA Top 80 Showcase, and I'm a big fan of him. He's coming in as a sophomore. A lot to like about his game. He just plays the game the right way, does a lot of the right things. I won't get into too many of the incoming people because I just don't. I don't know officially who's going to make teams, who's not going to make teams. So I don't want to dwell too much on who may or may not be coming in. But Cam Staskowski is a kid I thought I'd at least mention because I like his game a lot, and obviously saw a good amount of him there at the Top 80 Showcase. So let's see here. I got to speed up a little bit. We're under 4 minutes. Returning players worth noting. Ike has a boatload, like I said, that return a ton of offense. Jacob Scarrett, Dominic Riggio, Gianluca Varelli, Michael Zelenik, Greg Dockin. Those were all, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 guys. I want to say they were 5 of the top 6 scorers on the team. I could be a little off on that, but nonetheless, like Ike's biggest contributors from last year are all back, basically, is kind of what it seems like. So Scarrett, he was a guy who scores in bunches. I want to say he had 7 multi-point games last year. That's pretty huge. Riggio had 31 career goals, scored 28 points in 21 games last season. I think he's ripe for a big 23-24 campaign. So there's going to be a lot to like there out of the Eagles. St. Clair Shores, they only had 4 defensemen listed on the roster last year. So whoever they had on the back end, it didn't matter. They were going to log a ton of minutes. But there was 2 that stood out to me that I think could be in for a real nice campaign, building off of that experience where you're logging so much minutes and seeing so much ice to build off of that experience now. For one, Zach Del Monte entering his 2nd season. Del Monte was a point per game guy as a freshman. And then another guy here, senior Austin Brown. Both of those guys return after having logged a bunch of minutes last season. And, for a kid like Del Monte, I know for me, going from my freshman year to my sophomore year, that was the biggest jump in development for me personally. When you get that 2nd season under your belt, that first year, even with him being a point per game guy, you can still kind of be a little wide-eyed and kind of adjusting to the speed all year long. But then that 2nd season, you really settle in. You get a nice comfort level. You understand the game and the flow a little bit better. So I do think a kid like Del Monte could see a huge jump in his production there in the 2nd year, even though his first year was very impressively productive. I think in the blog I wrote for the website, I I put he's unofficially the leading scorer amongst freshmen last season. I can't confirm it because the website doesn't let me, but 25 points. I got to imagine not too many people outdid that, especially freshmen there. So, uh, oh man, I got to go quick here. Conference champs. I'll just jump right into this. My predictions. I'm going to take Ike again because I mentioned a lot of the returners they got coming back. It's hard not to pick them. I do have concerns in net though. Evan Hayes has graduated. He appeared in 24 games for them last season, so I think there's just concerns there of what will be in net, and I just don't know that at this moment. So Ike will have their hands full there and trying to figure some things out. But hopefully there's a solution there because if so, I think this team has the potential to do big things. The other one here, I wrote on the website that St. Clair Shores Unified could stand to be the biggest improvement year over year, not just in the conference, but in the state as a whole. They finished 2 games under 500 and only ranked 76th in the state, but I think could make a huge improvement on that here in 23-24 when you consider, you're returning your team's leading scorer, Brennan Link. I mentioned Del Monte already. Plus, they return all 3 goalies, which is a unique benefit there. So you got for another day. For another day. More on the Mac for another day. We will continue moving along here. If you guys couldn't hear that, that was my alarm going off. That's why I stopped mid-sentence there. I don't know how well that translated to the pod or to the audio recording, but maybe I'll crank up the volume here for you guys. That way, the third time around here, you can catch it. Okay, let me dial back the alarm clock and we will start the timer again. We'll close out today's episode talking about the Lakes Valley Conference. White Lake Lakeland is the defending champ over Milford, Walled Lake Northern. You got the Western Pinckney Co-op, which I think was last year their first year as a co-op. This could be year 2. South Lyon, and you got Lakes area. I don't think I missed anybody there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, 6. Cool. 6 teams. 6 teams in the conference. Again, I think it's a structured where you play everybody in the league twice. Lakeland actually went undefeated in conference play last year, 10-0, and currently riding an 11-game win streak in the LVC. They haven't lost a game since February of 2022. And I'm not sure, based on some of the research I've done, I'm not sure they're going to slow down anytime soon. So last season, they outscored conference opponents 125-47. I want to say that's an average margin of victory of almost 3 goals per game. Much of that offense, as a luxury, returns this fall or is expected to return this fall. You got Tim Hinkle, Brennan Grant, Austin Scanlon, should all be back. Like I said, projecting to see them all back. Plus, you got goaltender Paul Baker in net. Those are a lot of big, important pieces to have coming back after you just went undefeated in conference. It's been a dominant run. However, I do think the rest of the conference is going to start closing that gap a little bit here as we get into this season. And I'll have a little bit more on that in a minute. Couple players I think worth noting in the conference, worth paying attention to. Walled Lake Northern returns Andrew Evans up front. He was 3rd in the conference last year in scoring and was the team's leading scorer. Northern had a 10-6-2 record in games where Evans picked up a point. That plus you got Brennan Gessend. I think I'm saying that right. Gessend there on the back end. Kid had 14 points as a sophomore, 15 as a junior. Senior year, I think he's ripe there for it to be his best year yet. Northern, I think, could make a significant improvement in the conference, especially this season when you have some of those key guys coming back, some of those key contributors. So I think Northern is kind of worth mentioning and kind of spotlighting some of those players as well. Milford is another team. I like them to be in the hunt. I feel like they're in the hunt every year for this conference. Dennis Gagnon does a great job with Milford. He's a guy I've known and appreciated for a lot of years now, and what he does to build programs and develop kids. D-man Steven Vujic, sorry. Steven Vujic was a captain on the blue line last season as a junior. Expect to see him back. He logged a ton of minutes too. A big minute eater there on the back end. Um, I would expect the Mavericks to kind of lean on him again as a resource there. Let's see here. The other thing too, this could be another young team there for Coach Gagnon as well. They graduated a third of their roster. I want to say it was only 6 or 7 seniors, so it's not a huge class. But when you've got 17, 18, 19 kids on the roster, that's a big dent. It's a big divot to lose year over year. So it'll be an interesting challenge there. But I do, like I said, Milford returns quite a few important pieces, and it'll be interesting to see as well what they got coming in and the impact they can make right away. Because I do think programs like Milford, FNV was another one I talked about earlier. That they have a knack for St. Clair Shores, another one. Some of these programs do have a knack for getting those freshmen to come in and contribute right away and play a big role. So I wouldn't be surprised if Milford unveils some freshmen, some 08s, some 09s that maybe I'm not privy to yet, and they end up being a point per game kid or end up playing a pretty significant role there for the Mavericks. Also, and this is probably the biggest thing for Milford, Cooper Langley, kid's been a mainstay in net for Milford. He's played 51 of 52 games over the past 2 seasons with a 37-21-0 overall record in his career. A very rare instance where you get a goalie as a 4-year starter. And again, I'm talking about Milford finding those freshmen and building them for the long haul. Here's another guy, Cooper Langley, who came in as a freshman and now ripe for a senior year. He's had big years in the past and now in a position where he could, arguably have his best year at a pretty important time. So anytime you bring back goaltending, anytime you have that in your back pocket, I think it's the ultimate equalizer, especially in a conference like the Lakes Valley Conference. I mentioned obviously Lakeland being the front runner, Walled Lake Northern having some nice pieces. Now you got Milford, who's got a 4-year goalie and some offense up front. Nice pieces at all 3 levels. Milford is another team to be considered in the race, in the hunt, as I mentioned, for a conference championship. And then also, I don't even have notes on them, but South Lyon is a team I wouldn't sleep on either. South Lyon, I know they had a bit of a down year last year, but that's another program who always seems to find the one and done senior who comes in and plays a senior season and goes off for 50, 60 points or something like that, has a big year. And I'm not saying that's going to be the case this year for South Lyon. I'm just saying they do have a tendency. There's a ton of hockey players in that area. You don't fully know what South Lyon is going to bring out this season or who's going to be on that roster. That's a team who, I don't care how they finished or how bad or worse or whatever that case may be. I don't care what they looked like last year. I think they're always in the hunt for a conference championship here because they've done such a good job of that in the past several years. Being in the hunt, being in the mix right down to the end. So again, South Lyon wasn't one that I had highlighted. It wasn't one where I had too many players circled on my names to know, but it's still a program that I wouldn't sleep on in that conference. I think they still got a chance and could still muck it up and give themselves a shot at winning a conference championship there. So, okay, conference prediction. We got just under 3 minutes left here. Conference prediction. I'm not going to waver from this. It's pretty cut and dry. It's pretty simple. I do think the rest of the conference starts to catch up a little bit, but I do think ultimately Chalk wins out here and Lakeland ends up with another conference championship. They've won outright or a share of 5 of the last 6 conference championships on record. I don't know how I could possibly pick against that. However, like I said, and I've mentioned a bunch of these programs already, I've mentioned basically over half the conference already. as being in the hunt, and I think very well could be. I like Milford. A couple of guys I didn't even mention, Alex Kozar and Will Fulton up front. They scored 31 and 30 points respectively between the two of them. So that's a team that I think has a really good shot at potentially pulling that upset in the conference and maybe sneaking and stealing a conference championship there. If any one team is going to do it, Milford would probably be the way I would lean. However, the jerseys are a bit atrocious. They're a little tough for me. They're not my personal favorite. The color schemes, the design, whatever it may be, Milford leaves a little bit to desire there in terms of the jersey. But nonetheless, I'm giving them a very, very good chance to contend for the conference championship there. Walled Lake Northern, I mentioned them. As long as you got a kid like Andrew Evans, that kid gives Northern a chance to win more nights than not. So especially with the schedule and the conference that they play in. So South Lyon, okay, I did mention them. 8-14-1 last season. So definitely not the season type of season they've come to expect. So I'm hoping, and I'm sure they are too, looking for a big bounce back season from them coming up here. And even so, I mentioned some of the one and dones that they might tend to get as a junior or senior, something like that. They do still have kids like Gavin Mulcahy and Carter Temple, who are 1 and 2 on the team in scoring last year. So those are two big names. Anytime you can return two of some of your top scorers like that from a season ago, I think that definitely bodes well for you, regardless of who else you're losing or how many seniors you're losing when you can return some of your top dogs like that. So always a luxury to kind of have that in your back pocket. And what else? Sometimes, man, that's all you need too. In a conference like the LVC, sometimes all you need is a dynamic duo there, kind of put you over the top. And on that note, we will put a bow on it for this week's episode. I gave you 3, count them, 1, 2, 3, 10-minute talks. One there on the Mid-Michigan Hockey Conference, the Macomb Area Conference, and the Lakes Valley Conference. So be sure, what else do I got here? I'll also have written previews, blogs for all 3 of those conferences. I'll post those on pdspicks.com. So if I didn't give you enough information today in 10 minutes, you can always go to the website and get more info there in terms of players, teams, who to watch, what to pay attention to, what I'm looking for, and the whole 9 there. So what else? Next week, we'll be previewing 3 more conferences. What do I got here? Oh, here we go. So next week, I'm going to hit on the SEC, which is my old stomping grounds. And then we'll also hit on the SCHL, which in a way is my old stomping grounds. And then we'll also have OAA coverage as well. Plus whatever else comes up in the Michigan youth hockey circles. So that's it for this week's episode. If you enjoyed any bit of this, if you want to fight and argue with me over picks and tell me I'm an idiot and tell me who's going to win each conference or whatever it may be, you are more than welcome to do that on all social media platforms that I'm on: Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, PD's Picks. Be sure to find me. Be sure to follow. If you've made it this far through the episode, be sure to like and subscribe. I can download this podcast available anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, the whole 9. Be sure to like and subscribe. Your support is greatly appreciated, and I can't thank you enough. Until next week, be sure to skate hard, have fun, and I'll see you at the rink.